Welcome to the Certificate in Assessing Vocational Achievement. This is known as CAVA and formerly referred to as the A1 certificate. This is the full or main assessor qualification that includes all 3 units. Unit 1 is a theory unit which will be assessed through an essay. Unit 2 is about assessing in a workplace, and Unit 3 is about assessing in a classroom or a training environment. You do need access to real learners to be able to complete Unit 2 and 3. If you think this may be an issue, you can speak to your tutor. If you're not currently working as an assessor or a tutor, you may need to look at voluntary roles or other ways to access actual learners in both a workplace and a classroom or training environment to complete the practical parts of this qualification. Unit 1 of the assessor qualification is a theory unit. It's assessed by a written essay, so it's around 2,500 to 3,000 words. If it's been a while since you wrote an essay, don't worry. The worst that can happen, if it's not quite good enough, we are going to give you some feedback and advice on how to make it better. It's likely that you may have answered most of the questions and you may just have missed a certain part of it. The obvious first bit of advice is to make sure you reread your essay and reread the questions and ask yourself, have you answered them before you submit it? We do recommend that you do a spelling and grammar check on your essay, and you can do this using the built-in Microsoft Word functions. You can or may choose to use a third-party website like Grammarly, which will also give you suggestions on how to improve your text. Be careful though not to use things like AI to actually produce your answers for you or plagiarize other people's work. That is not allowed, and you can check out more information within our malpractice policy. But we do run your essays through software that will detect plagiarism, and it will also detect if AI have produced your answers. So please don't be tempted to do so. We do require you to contextualize your answers to your actual job. If you're a trainer in healthcare, we would expect to see healthcare related examples. When you're talking about legislation, we would expect you to talk about generic legislation such as Health and Safety at Work Act, Equality Act, but you can also mention any industry-specific regulations. When writing your essays, you do not need to reference. It's level 3, so referencing is not mandatory. However, if you know how to reference or you want to give it a go, please do so. There's further information on how to reference, and our preferred referencing style is Harvard. You can see a short video on our website page that will help you out if you wish to do so. We try our best to mark your essays within 5 working days. At busy times we may go over that, and sometimes you may have it back the same day. You will see the essays have a recommended word count. That is just a recommendation, so don't worry about hitting it perfectly, and don't worry if you go over it. However, if our recommended word count says 250 words and you only do 50, it's highly unlikely that you've answered the question correctly. So use it as a rough guide to give you an idea of our expectations of how much text is required. If you have any additional learning requirements when it comes to doing your essays, your written work, please contact your tutor and we can talk about alternative methods. We do sometimes get asked, what are the numbers at the end of the question in the essays? This refers to the learning outcomes that you will hit if you pass that question. That is not a reference for you to go looking in the material, so don't get confused with that. For your purposes, you can ignore it. The reason it's at the end of the question is because it shows our awarding body how we have mapped the learning outcomes to the questions. You can access our online library, which has a PDF copy of a workbook and loads of other resources available. You'll also find that link from your training materials. Your online learning account has loads of training resources available, probably a little bit more than you actually need for the course. So you can feel free to dip in and out of that training material as you're answering the questions if you're not quite sure how to answer them. Once your essay has been marked, your tutor will give you feedback via the system. You will be notified by email, and if you do need to resubmit, you just go back to the same place, make your amendments to your essay and re-upload. Unit 2 is about assessing in a workplace. You are required to assess a minimum of 2 different learners doing 2 different tasks. So that's 4 assessments in total that you need to do as part of your evidence. one of the 4 assessments must be observed by a qualified assessor. That can be us. You can send a recording in to your ATC training tutor and we will provide feedback. Or it can be a qualified assessor in your workplace. They must hold the same or higher assessor qualification and we must be able to get a certificate copy from them. They will also be required to fill in a form and a declaration as they do that. So Unit 2 is assessing workplace. So that is when a learner is physically at work, physically getting paid to do a task, and you would carry out that assessment. It might be a practical assessment, so you might include evidence such as videos, photos. It might be an observation checklist you're carrying out, but you must also show evidence of planning the assessment, which could even be emails. It could be a written document showing what you're going to do, and you must also show evidence of providing feedback to the learner after the assessment. We do have templates available for planning documents and feedback documents. We also have examples of assessment documents available within your materials, so don't worry if you don't have anything, there's plenty of guidance available. Unit 3 is about assessing people in a classroom or training environment. There is often a fine line between what is a training environment and what is a workplace. I'll give you some examples. So Unit 3 requires you to assess a minimum of 2 different learners doing 2 different things. That could be 2 different units, 2 different essays, 2 different tasks in a classroom or training environment. So a classroom environment, you can picture a typical college classroom, and an assessment there might be a simple written essay or a test. That would be one example of assessment. And you must show evidence of planning that assessment, which could be a scheme of work, for example. Or you should also show evidence of giving feedback to the learner, which may be after you've marked the assessment. It may be that you've sat down with the learner and gave them feedback. We do have examples of feedback documents available and also planning document templates if you need them. You can, of course, use your own company templates if you've already got them. As well as a typical classroom environment, you might have a workshop environment. So if it's a training workshop in a training centre, that would fall into Unit 3, and that might be more hands-on. You might want to include videos, photos, whatever you need to do to evidence that assessment. You probably need to create your own assessment paperwork if you're doing something very task specific, and you can submit all of that as evidence also. So to recap, for Unit 3, you do need to assess a minimum of 2 different learners doing 2 different things. So that's 4 assessments in total, and one of those 4 assessments does need to be observed by a qualified tutor. You can either do the assessment and record it and send it in to your tutor, or if you have a qualified assessor already in the workplace, they can do it for you, but we will need a copy of their certificate, and we recommend giving this in advance as we need to make sure it's suitable. So finally, I'd like to thank you again for choosing ATC training and wish you luck in completing your qualification. Please make full use of our training resources and contact your tutor if needed, and I really hope these resources and this qualification helps you in your future career. Thank you and good luck.